Ever since I was a child, my grandfather's been a larger-than-life personality, and created quite the impression on me as I grew up. He wasn't like any of my friends' grandparents. Hell, he isn't really like anyone I've ever met, but I wouldn't have him any other way. As a young child, my grandfather's bedtime stories were a little different than most grandparents. He would tell me stories of grand adventures in the mountains, hunting elk, bear, and mountain lions. And the best part is he had pictures to back it all up. This is the camera that he took with him on all of these adventures. Him having all of these pictures and telling me these stories definitely laid the foundation of why I love photography today. And this is my favorite picture that this camera has ever taken. During one of his hunting expeditions, the dogs had chased a mountain lion to the edge of a cliff. As he finally caught up to the dogs on his horse, this is what he could see. As I grew older, my grandfather continued to teach me about these two amazing art forms, of how to be a good, clean, efficient hunter, and how to truly capture a moment with photography. The hunting was very deliberate, as he bought my first rifle when I was 4 and began teaching me how to shoot. But the photography was more indirect. It was more about the story that he was telling behind each picture, and how well he captured that moment and that memory in time. This trip was originally planned for 2019, but obviously the COVID pandemic ruined all of that. I've been bird hunting with my grandpa a lot, as when I was younger he was always training bird dogs, but I had never been big game hunting with him. So having the opportunity to actually go out with him and go deer hunting was a big deal for me. And unfortunately, as they picked me up from the airport, he let me know that he had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease, making this trip even more important for me to document a great man and a great memory.
You set everything down?
My grandfather's hunting permit was for the Zuni Mountains, so we stayed in Grants for the night, and headed out before sunrise to start our first day of the hunt. My grandfather had just turned 87, so he didn't really have the physical stamina to actually go out and hunt a deer. So my uncle Rosalio and I would actually go out and do the tracking and find a deer for my grandpa. Up here in the Zuni Mountains, you'll find a lot of these structures. These are actually abandoned logging cabins from the 1800s. I'm genuinely surprised how well some of these have stood the test of time. And of course the occasional squatter spot. After searching the Zuni Mountains for multiple days, we found a nice valley where we could set up for a hunt. It wasn't exactly the easiest thing to get to, but we definitely thought it would be worth it in the long run. Everybody was so excited to get a deer. They had come out here multiple times in the last couple years and they'd always come home empty-handed. So to finally get one was such a relief and such a great way to start the trip. After another night's rest in Grants, we were back on the road. Now that the hunt was finished, it was time for the road trip. We'd be starting off in Grants and making pit stops along the way. One of the main reasons that Grandpa wanted to take me up this way was so he could show me the Rio Grande Gorge, and I'm really glad he did. After we left the Rio Grande Gorge, I noticed all these really interesting houses on the side of the road, so I asked Grandpa what they were. He told me about a guy that came out here and started a community that was completely self-sustainable, and they call their homes Earthships. I did some more research after this trip, and it's an amazing community. I highly recommend you all check it out. After driving a little further, we were in the San Juan Mountains, and that's when Grandpa told me that he had a couple other spots he wanted to show me. We had finally made it to Chama. We were staying with some of my grandpa's friends that owned a motel up there.
Alright, let's go.
Raeisusp. They've been here for years.
The owners of this place were absolutely amazing, and the rooms were extremely nice as well. If you ever make it up to Chama, I would highly recommend staying here. It could do with an electronics upgrade, but honestly seeing one of these brought back so many memories and made me feel like a kid again watching TV with Grandpa. Chama is right on the Colorado border, so when we woke up in the morning, Grandpa let me know that he wanted to go visit a friend that was right across the border, and I didn't mind at all. I was loving driving through the mountains. We ended up in an area right outside of Pagosa Springs. This is my grandpa's friend, Dick Ray, and he's quite an interesting guy as well. He's a bit of a local legend in the Pagosa Springs area. He used to run an outfitting business just like my grandfather, and was quite the hunter back in his day. But now he's an author and a conservationist, and owns a wildlife reserve right outside of Pagosa Springs. After visiting with Dick for a while, it was time to head back home. On our way back home, we actually took a different route, so we came to the Carson National Forest. Just another place I highly recommend you go. Once we got back home, I only had a couple more days on my trip, so Grandpa wanted to revisit some of the places he's taken me before, but unfortunately, they didn't look quite the same anymore. This fire happened a little over a decade ago, and you can still see the immense damage that it's left behind. And unfortunately, we even found places that my grandpa didn't know were destroyed. This is Lake Bonita. It used to be one of my grandpa's favorite fishing places. And if you know your Spanish, the name doesn't really represent the lake anymore. My grandfather was so excited to show me this place. And upon arrival, and him seeing the devastation to the area and the lake, he was heartbroken. And then I began to think about all the places that I love, and that I would want to share with a kid or a grandkid someday. But the way we treat our environment needs to drastically change, or the story that me and my grandpa just experienced will be a very common one. All of this made me even more grateful to take this trip when I could, and I think I created a pretty amazing photo album that my grandpa would be proud of. With that, I thank you all for watching, and thank you to everyone who made this trip possible. And Grandma, Grandpa, thank you for another amazing memory on top of the hundreds you've already given me in my life.